September 1944. Above the steaming jungles of Borneo, Major Richard Ira Bong eased his P-38 Lightning into a shallow dive, the twin Allison engines roaring in perfect harmony. 3,000 horsepower of polished American engineering. Through his bulletproof windscreen, Bong scanned the sky below. Rising from the clouds, Japanese fighters clawed upward, desperate to intercept a formation of B-24 Liberators. They had no idea that death was already circling above them, flown by an unassuming farm boy from Poplar, Wisconsin. That farm boy, now tracking their movements through a gun sight, had already claimed dozens of victories. By the time the war would end, his total would stand at 40, a record no American pilot has ever surpassed. This is the story of how a quiet, polite young man from rural Wisconsin became America's deadliest fighter pilot, how a man who once struggled in flight training transformed into an unmatched aerial tactician, and how relentless discipline, natural talent, and one of the most formidable aircraft ever built forged a legend in the Pacific skies. But Richard Bong's path to 40 victories didn't begin with heroism. It began with trouble. California, 1941. Second Lieutenant Richard Bong, newly graduated from Luke Field, Arizona, had just arrived at Hamilton Field for advanced flight training. Eager, restless, and far too confident in his abilities, Bong began performing low-altitude aerobatics over San Francisco, unauthorized stunts that violated strict Army Air Force's regulations. When word reached General George Kenney, commander of the 5th Air Force, the reprimand was swift. Bong could have been grounded permanently, yet Kenney saw something others didn't: raw natural instinct, exceptional aircraft control, reflexes sharper than most veterans. Instead of ending his career, Kenney decided to cultivate it. Bong was sent for additional training under watchful supervision. Kenney later remarked that Bong possessed the rare mix of intuition and composure that separated good pilots from extraordinary ones. By the fall of 1942, Bong was assigned to the 9th Fighter Squadron, 49th Fighter Group, soon to deploy to the unforgiving jungles of New Guinea. New Guinea, December 1942. The young lieutenant's first combat mission. Japanese bombers, escorted by agile Mitsubishi Zero fighters, were approaching Allied positions near Buna. The P-38 Lightning Bong now flew was unlike anything the Japanese had faced. Twin booms, twin engines, tricycle landing gear, counter-rotating propellers that canceled torque, all wrapped around an arsenal of 450 caliber machine guns and a 20mm cannon mounted in its nose. It was fast, deadly, and when flown correctly, unstoppable. But at low speeds, the Zero still had the edge. Its tight turning radius allowed Japanese pilots, veterans of China and the Philippines, to outmaneuver slower, heavier opponents. For inexperienced Allied pilots, a turning dogfight against a Zero was often suicide. Bong learned quickly. He didn't try to outturn them. He used what the P-38 offered: altitude, speed, and pure firepower. His first confirmed kills came from that philosophy. High above the jungle, he dove from altitude, lined up the enemy in his gun sight, and unleashed short, precise bursts. The concentrated nose-mounted firepower of the P-38 created a deadly cone of destruction. When enemy aircraft flew through that zone, they simply disintegrated. Bong's after-action reports were always calm, analytical. He recorded altitudes, headings, and conditions with almost clinical detachment. There was no bravado, no exaggeration, only results. By mastering the Lightning's strengths and avoiding its weaknesses, Bong began developing a new form of air combat, one built on patience, precision, and discipline. The P-38 was the creation of Lockheed's brilliant engineer, Clarence Kelly Johnson. It was revolutionary but unforgiving. Its twin Allison engines could propel it beyond 400 miles per hour to altitudes above 40,000 feet. Yet the same systems that gave it power also created deadly quirks. Turbo superchargers overheated easily. The twin-boom design affected airflow, and at high speeds the aircraft suffered from compressibility, shock waves forming on its wings that could lock up control surfaces. Many pilots died learning these limits. Bong survived by mastering them. By early 1943, Bong had already scored multiple victories. His squadron mates noticed something unusual: his remarkable accuracy. While most pilots fired long bursts, Bong fired only short, decisive bursts, 3, sometimes 2 seconds long. His gun camera footage revealed the pattern: careful stalking, precise positioning, one quick strike, and immediate disengagement. Major Thomas Lynch, another ace in the 49th Fighter Group, once described Bong's flying as calm and deliberate, like a man who never wasted a bullet. This was the art of deflection shooting, predicting where a moving target would be by the time bullets arrived, not where it was when fired. Few mastered it. Bong did it instinctively. His hand-eye coordination, depth perception, and reaction time made him lethal. July 1943. Skies over Lae, New Guinea. Japanese bombers, escorted by Zeros, moved toward Allied positions. Bong and his flight of P-38s climbed to intercept. Instead of diving headlong into the fight, Bong positioned his squadron higher, waiting for the perfect moment. When the formation reached a vulnerable gap in its defensive coverage, Bong rolled in from above. He attacked in one smooth dive, firing concentrated bursts from the P-38's cannon and machine guns. In seconds, 2 bombers disintegrated. Then he pulled up sharply, climbing back to altitude before Japanese fighters could react. This was classic Bong: use altitude for speed, speed for attack, and precision for the kill. His attacks were so efficient that his ammunition expenditure per kill was among the lowest in the U.S. Army Air Forces. By late 1943, Japanese intelligence began recognizing patterns in American air tactics: high-altitude ambushes, lightning-fast strikes, and disengagement before retaliation. Among these reports, one P-38 stood out, the aircraft marked with the name Marge, painted in honor of Bong's fiancée back home in Wisconsin. By November 1943, Bong had racked up 21 confirmed victories, making him one of America's top-scoring aces. General Kenney, proud yet protective of his young pilot, awarded Bong the Distinguished Service Cross and sent him home to promote war bonds. But Bong wasn't built for fame. He requested to return to combat as soon as possible. By March 1944, he was back in the skies over New Guinea, now flying an upgraded P-38J. It boasted more powerful engines, improved high-speed control, and better cockpit heating, critical for high-altitude missions. The Japanese, meanwhile, were weakening. Years of attrition had cost them many of their best pilots. Replacements were poorly trained and inexperienced, while men like Bong had logged hundreds of hours of combat. April 1944, above Hollandia. Bong led his squadron on a bomber escort mission. Intelligence warned that Japanese interceptors were inbound. Bong maneuvered his formation to maintain altitude advantage and sun position. When the enemy appeared, Bong's attack unfolded like clockwork, swift, organized, and devastating. He dove from above, firing short bursts at enemy aircraft locked onto American bombers. Within minutes, multiple Japanese fighters were burning wrecks. His tactics, altitude control, energy management, and precision marksmanship set the standard for American pilots throughout the Pacific. He never wasted a shot. Every movement had purpose. Every attack calculation. By June 1944, Richard Bong had achieved 28 confirmed victories, surpassing Eddie Rickenbacker's World War I record and becoming America's new ace of aces. General Kenney grounded him, declaring him too valuable to risk. But Bong refused to remain on the sidelines. After repeated requests, Kenney allowed him to fly, only on high-priority missions and with strict safety protocols. Even under restrictions, Bong's score continued to climb. His leadership, tactical precision, and steady nerves made him both a deadly fighter and a trusted mentor. October 1944. The skies above Balikpapan burned with tracer fire. American bombers struck Japanese oil refineries, the lifeblood of their war machine. Bong led the P-38 escort formation. He positioned his fighters with the sun behind them, a blinding advantage. As Japanese fighters dove on the bombers, Bong's squadron struck from above, tearing through enemy ranks with surgical precision. Midway through the battle, his aircraft took hits, one engine flaming, systems damaged. Most pilots would have bailed out. Bong didn't. He feathered the propeller, activated fire suppression, and kept fighting on one engine, even crippled. The P-38 remained deadly, and so was Bong. He scored additional kills before limping home on a single engine. Ground crews later found the aircraft riddled with bullet holes, hydraulics shredded. It shouldn't have flown. But Bong had brought it home. By December 1944, his victory count reached 40. General Kenny, acting under direct orders from General Douglas MacArthur, grounded him permanently. Bong had become more than a pilot. He was now a national symbol. His final combat flight took place on December 17, 1944. There was no contact, no kills, just one last patrol through the endless blue Pacific sky. He returned to base as the most successful fighter pilot in American history. But Richard Bong's story didn't end with his combat record. It was only beginning to define what made him legendary: his precision, his discipline, and the lessons he left behind for generations of pilots. December 1944. Major Richard Ira Bong, America's newly crowned ace of aces, had done the impossible. 40 confirmed aerial victories, 200 combat missions, survival against overwhelming odds. General George Kenny, acting on orders from General Douglas MacArthur, made it official. Bong was to be permanently grounded. The young pilot had become too valuable a symbol of morale, too precious to lose to the unpredictable chaos of the skies. His final mission took place on December 17, 1944, a routine patrol that ended without contact. He landed quietly, unaware he had just flown into history. When Bong left the front lines, he left behind more than statistics. He left behind a legacy of tactics, precision, and a standard of aerial discipline that would influence U.S. fighter doctrine for decades. The 40 planes he shot down told only part of the story. His true achievement was measured in the bomber crews he saved, formations that made it home because Bong's P-38s were there to shield them from Japanese interceptors. It was in the soldiers on the ground, who received vital air support from missions he led, and it was in the training manuals that followed, where Bong's combat reports, gun camera footage, and methodical approach to deflection shooting became required study for every American fighter pilot entering the Pacific War. His philosophy was simple: energy, position, and precision. Never turn fight a zero, attack from altitude, strike fast, disengage faster. What began as personal instinct became formal doctrine. Future fighter pilots learned to use altitude advantage, speed management, and the P-38's raw power to outthink rather than outmuscle their enemies. General Kenny would later write, "Bong's combat reports read like textbooks on how to survive. He didn't win because he was reckless. He won because he was deliberate." Even among elite aces, Bong's ammunition efficiency and accuracy stood apart. Analysts reviewing his gun camera film found that his hit percentage far exceeded that of most combat pilots. His firing runs were short, controlled, and devastatingly effective. Every pull of the trigger was a calculation, not an impulse. The P-38, Lightning itself, deserves a chapter in the legend. Lockheed's twin-boom fighter became an icon of the Pacific War, fast, heavily armed, and reliable in the hands of skilled pilots. More than 10,000 Lightnings were built during the war, serving across every theater. In the Pacific, it became the backbone of long-range escort and strike missions, able to fly farther, higher, and faster than most aircraft of its generation. Its design offered unique advantages: twin engines for redundancy, tricycle landing gear for stability, and a central weapons mount that allowed all guns to fire directly forward, eliminating the convergence issues that plagued wing-mounted fighters. 4 50-caliber machine guns and a 20mm cannon concentrated in the nose produced an unmatched burst of destructive power. When fired with accuracy, as Bong did, that firepower could disintegrate enemy aircraft in seconds. For Bong, the P-38 wasn't just a machine, it was a partner. Together, man and aircraft became one of the most effective air combat combinations of the Second World War. Letters Bong sent to his fiancée, Marjorie Vattendahl, reveal a man who never saw himself as a hero. In one letter, he wrote, "I'm not out here for medals. I'm out here to make sure the boys in those bombers get home." That humility, combined with unmatched skill, made him a national symbol. When Bong returned home in 1945, the war still raged, but the end was in sight. He was awarded the Medal of Honor, presented personally by General MacArthur. The citation read, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action above and beyond the call of duty." At just 24, Bong was now one of America's most decorated servicemen. But Bong wasn't ready to retire from the air. Flying had become his identity. After years in propeller-driven combat aircraft, he was drawn to the future, the next evolution of flight, the jet age. Assigned to Lockheed as a test pilot, Bong began training on the new P-80 Shooting Star, America's first operational jet fighter. It was a marvel of modern engineering, sleek, smooth, and revolutionary. Powered by a single turbojet producing 4,000 pounds of thrust, it could exceed 500 miles per hour, far faster than any piston-engine aircraft of the war. To Bong, the P-80 represented a new frontier, a chance to transition from combat pilot to aviation pioneer. August 6, 1945. Lockheed Air Terminal, Burbank, California. It was a bright summer morning when Major Bong climbed into the cockpit of a P-80 for a routine acceptance flight. He had married Marge just weeks earlier. Life was finally beginning to slow down. The jet's canopy slid shut. The engine ignited, a high-pitched whine unlike the deep rumble of the Lightning's propellers. Bong taxied to the runway, cleared for takeoff. Moments after lifting off, something went wrong. The jet's fuel pump failed. Power dropped instantly. The engine flamed out at low altitude, too low for recovery. Bong radioed that he was attempting restart procedures. He tried to turn back toward the runway, but the aircraft began losing altitude rapidly. With almost no time, he attempted to bail out. The parachute barely cleared the canopy. At 2:30 p.m., the jet crashed into a residential area of North Hollywood. Major Richard Ira Bong, America's ace of aces, was killed instantly. He was 24 years old. That same day, halfway across the Pacific, another piece of history unfolded. The Enola Gay, a B-29 superfortress, dropped the first atomic bomb on Hiroshima. The dawn of the nuclear age overshadowed the loss of America's greatest fighter pilot. Newspapers carried his obituary beside headlines that announced a new world era, one Bong would never see. Decades later, his record remains untouched. 40 confirmed victories, each achieved through direct visual combat. In an era when modern air warfare is fought beyond visual range, such a record will likely never be broken. The qualities that defined Bong, discipline, calculation, precision, belonged to a vanished era of dogfighting, when pilots looked into the eyes of their adversaries before pulling the trigger. His story endures not because of how many aircraft he destroyed, but because of how he fought. With restraint, with mastery, with purpose. Today, visitors to the Richard the Fur Bong Veterans Historical Center in Superior, Wisconsin, can trace his journey from small-town boy to national hero. His Medal of Honor is displayed under glass. His flight logs, documenting over 200 combat missions, lie open beside letters to Marge, a restored P-38 Lightning. Painted with Marge on its nose, stands proudly as a tribute. General George Kenney, the man who once almost grounded him for reckless aerobatics, would later write, "Bong was the most effective fighter pilot I ever observed. He didn't win by chance, he won by precision. The jungles where Bong once fought have reclaimed the wreckage of war. The twisted remains of Japanese Zeros and American Lightnings lie scattered, rusting back into the soil. But Bong's record still stands, a permanent reminder of what skill, discipline, and courage could achieve in the unforgiving skies of the Pacific. His name became synonymous with excellence. His tactics immortalized in Air Force doctrine. Even today, cadets learn about his gunnery, techniques, and his ability to calculate deflection angles. Instinctively, skills that transformed air combat from chaos into precision science. Richard Ira Bong's story is not just that of a warrior. It is the story of a craftsman, a technician of survival. He fought not through rage or recklessness, but through understanding. Mastery of his aircraft, mastery of himself. Every kill was the result of preparation. Every maneuver a study in geometry and timing. He proved that success in combat was not about aggression, but about execution. Nearly 80 years later, his record remains unbeaten, and likely will forever. The age of close-range aerial duels is gone. Missiles and radar have replaced instinct and eyesight. But somewhere in the sky over Borneo, over New Guinea, over the endless blue of the Pacific, the legacy of Major Richard Bong still flies, etched into history as America's ace of aces. 40 victories. 200 missions. 1 legend. Major Richard Ira Bong. Proof that precision, not aggression, defines greatness in the air.